I'm feeling a little like I'm in the Matrix, man. I'm sort of seeing all the matchups and looking at things and saying, I can figure this thing out. I've got it.
All right, everybody, and welcome back. As always, I am your party host, Joe Rivera, and along with me, another one of the preeminent ball knowers of USA Today Sports. You know him as Jacob Camenker. We know him as Vod Stewart. Jacob, let me tell you something. You don't let the kid get hot. You might be on a little bit of a heater here in these recent weeks, my friend. It looks like you're helping fantasy managers along. Not only are you helping fantasy managers along, but Jonathan Taylor's helping fantasy managers along. Jameson Williams is helping fantasy managers. So let's what's the vibes? What are the vibes right now, my friend? How are you feeling?
I'm feeling a little like I'm in the Matrix, man. I'm sort of seeing all the matchups and looking at things and saying, I can figure this thing out. I've got it. I know what I'm seeing. The Travion Henderson breakout game. I felt like I could see that one coming, even if it happened in a way that I didn't expect. Thought he would do more through the air than on the ground. But you see that. You see Jameson Williams with the offensive coordinator wanting him to get more involved. All of a sudden, he's taken off. So I feel like we know the matchups at this point that we want to exploit, and we're starting to see the guys that we know, hey, this guy's going to take off. And some of these other guys like A.J. Brown, where we're looking at and saying, hey, if he's telling me to bench him in fantasy, maybe I should listen to him.
Yeah, maybe that's a well we shouldn't keep going back to, my friend. But until the Eagles figure out the AJ Brown dilemma, let's try and help fantasy managers along here with some sleeper picks, right? Let's head out to the desert first and foremost, Jacob, where had something of a soft reboot at quarterback, I guess you could say, with Kyler Murray on IR. Jacoby Brissett is highlighting your sleeper picks for the week. Why are you high on Brissett?
Yeah, I just think Brissett has quietly done a very solid job for the Cardinals at quarterback. The wins aren't following. They're 1-3 in his 4 starts, but he's thrown 2 touchdowns in each of those games and has at least 261 passing yards. The passing offense looks a bit cleaner with him at quarterback, a little bit more consistent than it was with Kyler Murray. So I think he's going to be a high floor option moving forward, and he should perform well against the 49ers defense this week that's allowed multiple passing touchdowns in 5 of their last 6 games. I think you can expect another game with about 250 passing yards and 2 touchdowns from Brissett because the Cardinals still don't have much of a run game. They're just super banged up at the running back position, so they're going to keep leaning on Brissett to carry them, and he's shown that he can do that.
All right, Jacob. I mean, what is there to believe in with the Cardinals offense right now? Right? Like what's your biggest takeaway of fantasy prospects with the Cardinals? Is it Marvin Harrison Jr. with Kyler Murray out? Like what do you expect moving forward from them?
Yeah, I think Marvin Harrison Jr. is the big takeaway because we've seen Jacoby Brissett kind of try to force feed him the ball a little bit more. So I think moving forward, when you're looking at Marvin Harrison Jr., he's going to be one of those guys that has a high volume of targets the rest of the season because Jonathan Gannon and company over there are probably coaching for their jobs. So they're going to want to lean on their best pass catching weapons. That's 100% Marvin Harrison Jr. and Trey McBride. So I would expect them to continue to get a lot of targets from Jacoby Brissett, and they'll be big time fantasy assets. And then Brissett's going to be that quality streamer at quarterback. But, Trey Benson might be back from injury eventually, but I just don't know that this running game's ever going to get going this season.
And speaking of running games, Jacob, let's head out to Tampa Bay. And it's not Bucky Irving, which we're still kind of in limbo here. But it's another running back in Tampa Bay who makes your sleeper list. And who is that player, Jacob?
Yeah, so I'm rolling with Sean Tucker this week as one of my favorite sleepers. I just think that he might end up taking on the lead role in Tampa Bay's backfield because, as you mentioned, we just don't know when Bucky Irving is going to come back. There's always one guy every single year in the NFL who gets hurt. We don't think it's going to be a long-term absence. He doesn't go on IR, and then every week we're just asking, like, hey, is this the week that Bucky's going to be back? And this just has not happened yet. He has not practiced since suffering that shoulder injury in week 4 against the Eagles. And in his absence, Rachaad White has been the lead back, but White's averaging just 3.7 yards per carry. And Tucker outperformed him against the Patriots. Tucker's actually the first running back this season to post at least 50 rushing yards against the Patriots defense. It's been elite against the run. I believe they're allowing less than 80 rushing yards per game, which is far and away best in the league. So I think Tucker has a much better matchup with the Bills defense this week that surrendered a league high tying 12 rushing touchdowns to running backs. The only team that matches is the Tennessee Titans. So I think that the Buccaneers could look to lean on the run, and Tucker might end up being the lead back there because White's just been ineffective and Irving's been unavailable.
Jacob, let's head out to Las Vegas here. And this is a sexy pick for a relatively unsexy team here. You might have to give me some selling here on Tyler Lockett and why he makes a sleeper pick for the week.
Okay, so I know it's probably not a great idea to back a 33-year-old veteran who's been with his team like 3 weeks, but you have to look at the matchup. The Raiders are playing the Cowboys on Monday Night Football. Cowboys are considerably weaker than the Denver defense that Lockett just played, and he led the Raiders with 5 catches and 44 yards against Denver, who's the best team against fantasy receivers this year. Cowboys are the worst. They've allowed a league high 16 touchdowns to the position. So if Lockett continues to get a high volume of targets, and he might because he's kind of stepped into the Jacoby Myers role with him being traded to the Jaguars, and we know he has long-term chemistry with Geno Smith from their time together in Seattle. So I just think Lockett has a higher floor than people might realize. And yeah, well, is his ceiling great? Maybe not in most matchups, but against the Cowboys, I think he's worth a flyer if you're really desperate for help at the wide receiver 3 or flex position. So gonna hang my hat on him, and we'll see if it works out.
Jacob, I'm just curious what's your feel on Ashton Genty? Right? Is he one of the bigger fantasy disappointments of the 2025 season?
I think you can make a case for him being a disappointment because of how highly he was drafted. I know his average draft position was in the first round. It was probably anywhere from 5 to 12 in most leagues that people are playing in. But I think the bigger issue with him isn't his skill set. The Raiders have one of the worst blocking units in front of him in the league. Their offensive line is just really not performing up to snuff. They've been without Colton Miller, their star left tackle, for most of the year. And they were actually moving the ball decently against the Broncos in Thursday Night Football last week. But then they lost right guard Jackson Powers Johnson to an injury, and he's going to be out long term as well. And after that, they just couldn't move the ball. So I think Genty is one of those guys that you're looking at and saying, yeah, the volume's going to be there. Yeah, the touchdowns are going to potentially be there. But just that blocking in front of him is just going to limit his ceiling, because he's going to have a lot of those runs that are like, oh, he did a good job of getting hit behind the line of scrimmage into a 1-yard gain, which good for football, but not good for fantasy owners.
All right, Jacob. And last but not least on your sleepers list, a lot of headlines have been talking about Aaron Rodgers and that Steelers offense, not just this week, but throughout the season, right? Something just doesn't quite seem right, whether it's the connection with DK Metcalf, but seems like you're pretty bullish on Pat Freiermuth this week in a sleeper pick. Why is that?
Yeah, so the Bengals have easily the worst defense against tight ends this year. It is remarkable, Joe. They have given up 12 receiving touchdowns to the position. No other team in the league has given up more than 7. So, I mean, that's just insane. And the Bengals had their bye week already. So this has come across 10 games, and some of these teams that have allowed 7 touchdowns have played 11 games. So you're talking about a defense that really cannot defend tight ends. Last time the Steelers played against the Bengals, their tight ends scored 4 touchdowns. Pat Freiermuth had 2, Darnell Washington had 1, and Jonnu Smith had 1. You could really take your pick of that group, whoever's your favorite to be the sleeper. I just think Freiermuth's probably the best and most explosive receiving option. So I'm willing to back him here if you're needing help at the tight end position, because it's just been so easy to predict the success of tight ends against the Bengals. So we're going to keep going back to that well. We've seen them give up a lot of long touchdowns to tight ends, be it to Freiermuth or Colston Loveland. So feel free to fire up Freiermuth again in this spot and just say, hey, he could pop off. Does he have a low floor? Sure, but his ceiling might be higher than any other streaming tight end this week.
And it doesn't matter who's throwing the ball to the tight end, too, because we saw Brees Hall throw a touchdown pass to Mason Taylor against the Bengals. So it don't really matter. Just throw him out there, right?